There is this misnomer in the world, and I'm guilty of having repeated myself. There's this phrase that people use, which is that you are the average of the 5 people you hang out with the most frequently. And that's not actually entirely true. I think research has shown that it's not about who you spend the most time with on a day-to-day basis. It's who you compare yourself to. It's who you look up to. It's who you measure yourself against. That's who you become the average of. And so one of the things that is true is that if you want to change your life, change the caliber of people that you compare yourself to. Instead of comparing yourself to Timmy, who you've known since 2nd grade and who's, $40,000 a year bagging groceries. That's a really good bag boy, actually. I don't know how much they make. That's probably pretty good. But instead of comparing yourself to Timmy, who might be like the highest paid bag boy in the world, compare yourself to Gertrude from Baltimore, who is your same age, has your same skills, and wants to go on and be like this world-renowned artist, and she's crushing it on social media, right? Like, compare yourself to the people that you would like to be like, right? Now, one of the ways that you can do this, like who should you measure yourself against? And this is a question Anuj and I were talking about the other day, because he's like, hey, what's the deal with Tony Robbins? He's like, it's just a really funny question. Like, what's the deal with that guy? Tony Robbins is considered like the OG of personal development, right? He's been doing this for so many years. He's the guy. And he's the guy that if you were to come into it right now, you might look at him and be like, well, he says all the same things that everybody else says. And like, I don't really get what the appeal is. But the thing is, and I dismissed Tony Robbins for a really long time as well. It wasn't until I started reading some of his books, and then actually it wasn't until this other thing happened that I started taking him way more seriously. The other thing that happened was I started to notice that all the people I looked up to, or the people that I was comparing myself to, or the people I was competing mentally in my mind against, they were all referencing Tony Robbins. They were all looking up to him. And I started to realize that a really good proxy for whether or not somebody is worth looking up to or comparing yourself to is asking yourself, who are the people that I look up to currently? Who do they look up to? And when you go through that, you find yourself looking to a lot of the OGs of the space, surprisingly. So for instance, if you were to compare yourself to or hold yourself to the standard of an Alex Hormozi, right? If you're watching this content, I'm going to assume that you probably know who Alex is, right? So if you're like, I want to be like Alex, well, the question that you could ask yourself is like, well, who does Alex look up to? Who does he admire? Who does he measure himself against? And he said this before, I think, that, one of his mentors, digital mentors rather, is Charlie Munger, right? So there's an OG of the space. Or it could be Steve Jobs. It could be Seneca. It could be Stoic philosophers. Who knows? Or it could be J.D. Rockefeller, right? What you start to notice is that as you go up the levels of like who people admire, the people they get older and older, and the things that they've done go further and further back into history. But we got to talking again. Anuj and I. He's like, okay, well, what do you think about so and so? And specifically, the person he was referencing was Tai Lopez. Like, what do you think about Tai Lopez? And my initial feeling was like, I don't know anything about Tai. But nobody that I look up to has ever mentioned Tai Lopez. They've never said anything positive or negative necessarily. He's just a non-feature, and nobody I look up to has ever referenced him in private conversations or in public. That from what I can tell, and that tells me a lot. It means he doesn't register on the radar of people that I already look up to, and so I don't pay attention to him. Anuja asked, "What about Iman Ghatzi?" I was like, "Well, Iman, he looks like he's done some great things, but again." Literally nobody I hang out with, nobody I look up to, nobody I talk to has ever mentioned him. So he's not a person I look up to by any extension. Now, that doesn't mean you can't find these diamonds in the rough, but generally, if you're trying to figure out, like, is that person a huckster? Are they real? Are they legitimate? Like, trace it. Be like, who are the people that I look up to? Who do they look up to? And that's a great way to continually elevate and find like better and better mentors. Because instead of looking up to Alex Hormozi, if he looks up to this other person, maybe you should just go jump over Alex and just go straight to Charlie, go straight to Steve Jobs, go straight to Elon Musk or whoever Elon Musk looks up to, Edwin Land from Polaroid, right? You might not even know that name, right? But gets mentioned consistently in the world of like, that was Steve Jobs' guy that he looked up to. So that's how I've kind of triangulated over the years of like, who should you pay attention to in the internet space? Because there's a lot of voices, a lot of people talking. That can be a really helpful tool. But what I would encourage you to spend some time on thinking about today is, and maybe even journal on this, is spend a little bit of time writing out who are the people that you look up to, who are the people that you admire. It just happens to be that I journaled on this morning. Like, ask myself, who are the 2 people that I think are leaving amazing legacies? And I just wrote out, why is it that I think they're doing amazing things? What it is about them, their personality, their skills, what is it that they have that I admire? And by getting clear about why you look up to the people that you do, you can start to triangulate the character traits, the values, the worldviews that you hold most dear. And now you can ask yourself, okay, how do I measure up against that? What can I do today to more deeply embody that character trait? It could be, one of the people that I look up to is Charlie Munger, and I admire his wisdom, or I admire his humility. That's one of the character traits I really admire about him. Multi-billionaire person, passed away last year. He was very humble. And so you can ask yourself, well, if I hold that in higher esteem for Charlie, what would it mean for me to be more humble? How could I show that trait today? What would it look like for me to live more like Charlie in my activities? And just by being aware of that, aware of what it is that we're trying to target and move towards, like what is the goal for our character, you're going to have an easier time actually hitting that goal. So that is my challenge to you today. That is the homework. Good luck, Godspeed. Nobody's going to check your work. Only you will know if you didn't do it. And, I'll have this niggling feeling in the back of my mind that says, I don't think they did it. And if we ever meet in person, I'm going to call you out on it. But if we never meet, then you got nothing to worry about. And in the meantime, just keep consuming these podcasts. They're totally free. And if you look up to me and you want to know who I look up to, then go watch one of the previous episodes where I talked about my digital mentors, or like my 3 biggest mentors. Go check that out. And I'll break down exactly who I look up to and why I look up to them. And that's it. That's all I got, guys. I'll see you guys in the next episode.